I guess to start us off of what happened and what can you tell us about the social media video that I guess we've all seen now?
Sure. So I'm aware of the video that's out there on social media, and what that video depicts, obviously, is our officers that have arrested a suspect, taking him outside of a convenience store, ultimately around to the side of the convenience store. The video that's out on social media, there's a gap in the video in which the young lady that's making that video is talking to the camera herself. And then, of course, at that point, you hear a disturbance occurring on the side of the store, and some of the comments are similar to "put your hands behind your back" or "place your hands behind your back," which I would imagine is concerning to folks, because when we walked the suspect out of the store, he was in fact handcuffed behind his back. And the video then picks up with the suspect being on the ground, our officers, being on top of him, and there's a struggle going on. What we have uncovered is a second video. This store actually has surveillance cameras, and we have been able to obtain a second video that fills in that gap for us. And what happens is, as our officers are walking this suspect around the side of the building, as soon as they go out of the frame that is captured on the social media video, the suspect tries to walk away from the officers. They grab a hold of him again, trying to direct him over to the side where they can bring in the vehicle to pick him up. And at that point, he breaks free of the handcuffs. So there was an issue with handcuffing, and that he was able to get free from his handcuffs, and he brings both arms around the front, and the officers grab a hold again, trying to get him back in handcuffs. They end up taking the suspect to the ground, and that's the struggle that we see when the first video, the one that's on social media, reacquires the images. That's when it kind of picks up that piece there. So the vital piece that is missing from what we saw on the video that's on social media fills in that gap of why did we end up with the resistance, why were we ending up struggling with this suspect, and ultimately, overcoming the resistance using a taser and other tactics.
Have you seen the second video?
Yes, I have.
Do you know if that's going to be released at all to the public?
Right now, there's an ongoing review of the incident, so
Okay.
I won't be releasing it at this point. That incident's going to go through the standard review that all of our use of force incidents go through, and then at that point, we'll determine whether or not that's something that we can release, depending upon the review and whether it leads to anything further.
And you've talked to the unit, right?
Yes. So on top of the incident, there were a few things that were concerning to me. First and foremost, two of the officers that were involved in this incident were wearing balaclavas on their face, therefore covering up their face. I understand that there's a time and a place where we need to wear equipment like that, but those really are tactical operations, whether it be a SWAT team or a bomb squad. I really question the need to use a face shield like that on frontline patrols, and I have in fact already given word to the units that do that type of work that there's no need for that, and that's not going to happen again. If we have officers that need to conceal their identity because they do undercover work or something similar, then those should not be the officers that we're placing in the frontline capacity of making part of the arrest team. So that has already been addressed today. There's one other thing that's evident on that video, and that is one of the officers was wearing a Santa hat with the word naughty on the front of it. That is a violation of policy, and that too is being addressed.
Any idea on why the officers felt that they needed to take the man around the side? In the video you see an SUV, it didn't seem to be a police car, but what have you found out so far about that?
They were in front of the store. That parking lot is a rather tight parking lot with the gas pumps and all, and I understand the area where they were taking him to was much better lit than the front of the store, so they were bringing him over to the side. Again, this incident is just now under review, so I don't want to speculate why, but I do know that the area they were bringing him to was better lit.
People on social media would see the punching action. Is that common when you try to once a suspect is resisting? Is that common practice? You can't really exactly see where the fist was hitting at, but you could definitely tell it was punching. Is that recommended or not, or is there any best practice on that?
Sure. So we follow the dynamic response to resistance model, and officers will use the level of force that they believe is appropriate to overcome the resistance that they're encountering. Strikes with an empty hand, which is like a fist strike, in other words, strikes without a baton or an impact weapon, are one of our lowest levels of force, and then we do have specific target areas. The video the surveillance video from the convenience store makes it much more clear where those strikes were being delivered. And many of the strikes were being delivered to the hand that was actually broke free, that had a handcuff on it. But there were also some strikes that were delivered to the suspect's face.
Yeah, that's important to know, though, if it's one of the lowest impact actions you can take, right, as opposed to a taser or what would be higher force.
Correct. So the empty hands are really the first, one of the first lines of techniques that we teach officers. The first one, obviously, is just communication. It's just talking to the subject, trying to de-escalate the situation. But then you have opportunities such as pepper spray or to use your hands with the defensive tactics that you have been taught. And again, there are specific target zones that we tell the officers where you're most likely to gain compliance if you apply the techniques to those. And again, from the limited review I've been able to do at this point, many of the strikes that you see on the surveillance video that are not as obvious from the social media video do show that they're directed at the arm, the leg, but there are a few that are also to the head.
But that's pretty common. I mean, that's practice, right?
That is a technique that is taught.
Okay.
And is the head one of the target zones or not one of the target zones?
You can, depending upon, again, the circumstances. When you do a strike to the head, it is a higher level use of force than if it is to one of the target zones on the arms or the legs. But it is not prohibited. It just has to be objectively reasonable to be within policy at that point.
And I know y'all are still reviewing it, but at this point, does it seem to be objectively reasonable, that use of force that you view?
I'm not in a position where I can say that. I haven't read the reports on this incident or anything. I've just merely had the opportunity to watch the videos. And again, given the attention that this is getting in the community and on social media, understandably so, because the critical piece of that video that kind of identifies what took place next is not out in the public purview right now. And again, it clearly depicts that the officer breaks his hands free from his handcuffs, which we do need to understand how he was able to get free of his handcuffs. And our officers were put in a position where they had to regain control and then get him secured again.
Got it.
Anything else you want to talk about, or what's important about, in a world of social media where you might not see the full story? Any thoughts on big picture things that the public can take away, what you guys take away from these kind of things?
Sure. First and foremost, we recognize that there are video cameras with almost anybody at any time, given the smart media that we all carry with us with our phones. So we appreciate if citizens capture videos that they think are problematic or they think would be beneficial to the police department. Let us know. Send them to us. Post them on social media if you want to, absolutely, but send them to us as well so that we can get started looking at something if there is an issue that we want to look at. And again, it's always important to realize that a video gives one angle of a situation. We've had this conversation as we've worked ourselves towards body-worn cameras in the police department, that body-worn cameras, we're very excited to have them, and they're going to be a great tool for us, but they too offer only one view of what's going on because they're focused in one direction, and obviously the officers can look in many different directions as they're assessing a situation. So it's just a caution to be aware that a video may only depict one view, and again, in this situation, we're very fortunate that we had surveillance cameras that captured a much different view that at least let us know exactly what happened. So now we're in a better position to evaluate what happened to determine whether or not it was within our policies.
I just have one more question when it comes to, so after somebody is in handcuffs, or at least the officers think that he's in handcuffs and arrested, what happens then? So they take him around to do what? Yeah,
what I would imagine they were doing, and again, I wasn't there, but they were about to transport this individual, and I would imagine that they were about to do a frisk and search of his person to ensure that he did not have any contraband or any weapons on him.
And my understanding of the body cam rollout, these officers were not equipped with body cams at that point, right?
I'm not aware that they were, but I haven't gotten to that level of detail yet.
Okay, got it.
Thanks so much.
Good. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah.